Good afternoon, colleagues from Vienna. I wish you all a very warm welcome to our side event today. My name is Kate Lannon. I'm the senior lawyer with the Secretariat of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and I'm very pleased to be with you as your moderator today. Before we get started, and we do have quite a lot to talk about in a short time, just two short items of housekeeping, if you don't mind. The first is, please use your question and answer, that's the Q&A function, in order to ask a question. We look forward to receiving all of your questions, of course, and please feel free to send them while the presenters are actually presenting, and we'll be happy to respond at the end once all presenters have finished. In addition, should you be experiencing any technical issues, please do use the chat function in order to seek support. So without any further delay, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Adriana Blanco Marquizo, who is, of course, the head of the Secretariat of the WHO Framework Convention, in order to provide us with some opening remarks. Adriana, please.
Thank you, Kate. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, President of the Meeting of the Parties, and distinguished panelists. On behalf of the Secretariat of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or the WHO FCTC as we call it, I want to welcome you to the side event entitled Beyond Adverse Health Consequences, the link between illicit trade in tobacco products and other criminal activities. Together with the Government of India and the World Customs Organization, our co-sponsor today, we would like to thank the Secretariat of the UNODC for the opportunity to organize this event at the 11th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UNTOC. The Secretariat serves two treaties, the WHO FCTC and the Protocol to Eliminate Illicit Trade in Tobacco Products. The protocol is a legally binding instrument designed to eliminate all forms of illicit trade in tobacco products. It entered into force in 2019 and currently has 66 parties. The side event will discuss how illicit trade in tobacco products cause substantial losses in government revenues and at the same time contributes to the funding of international criminal activities. This concern has become more pressing than ever. As an example, cigarette smuggling has been linked to armed insurgent groups in the Middle East, Africa, and other parts of the world. In areas of Central and Eastern Africa, research has found that rebel groups have used the illicit tobacco products to finance their activities. I would like to emphasize, as recalled in the protocol, the importance of the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, and I invite parties to it to also apply its provision to combat illicit trade in tobacco products. I would also like to take this opportunity to invite international organizations to support the implementation of the protocol and to acknowledge its role in the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks, Adriana, and helping us set the tone for this meeting and the discussion that we will have today. May I now please give the floor to Her Excellency Roli Singh, President of the Meeting of the Parties to the Protocol, Additional Secretary and Mission Director, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, for her opening remarks. Over to you, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the side event where we can hear from our expert panelists how illicit trade in tobacco products goes beyond public health threats, as it also fuels organized crime and corruption. But first, I would like to express my appreciation to the Secretariat of UNODC for allowing us to hold this side event. My special thanks go to the Secretariat of the WHO FCTC for organizing this event and the World Customs Organization and observer to the Meeting of the Parties for being our co-sponsor. It is my honor to serve as the President of the Meeting of Parties to the Protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. As Dr. Blanco Marquizo aptly articulated earlier, this international treaty to eliminate all forms of illicit trade in tobacco products is a crucial tool in fighting organized crime. Adopted in November 2012, the protocol entered into force in September 2018 and so far has 66 parties. The protocol builds on and complements Article 15 of the WHO FCTC, which requires parties to implement measures to counter illicit trade in tobacco products and to further control the supply chain. The protocol covers important issues concerning the legal framework applicable to offenses related to illicit trade in tobacco products, including provisions on liability, prosecution, and sanctions. The protocol also includes provisions aimed to boost international cooperation with measures on information sharing, technical and law enforcement cooperation, mutual legal and administrative assistance, and extradition. Simply put, the protocol is a global solution to a global problem. But to fully implement the protocol, it is of key importance to achieve multi-sectoral cooperation between all relevant sectors and agencies at both national and global levels. Please allow me to take this opportunity to invite parties and international organizations to work together so that we can achieve the objectives of the protocol. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for helping us further set the scene and highlighting some aspects of how the protocol actually functions in order to deal with this problem of illicit trade in tobacco products. Next, we'll move on to open the floor for our esteemed panelists. Our first speaker this afternoon is Vladimir Stasko, who's going to talk a little bit about how illicit trade in tobacco products is connected with other illegal activities. Vladimir is a technical officer with the World Customs Organization in Brussels. He is managing the revenue program dedicated to fighting customs fraud with revenue impact, including illicit trade in excise goods. Vladimir, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear Madam Mo President, dear Madam Head of the Secretariat of the WHO FCTC, dear Sir from the UNODC, dear Madam Moderator and panelists, and dear ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariats of the WHO FCTC and also UNODC for this opportunity for WCO to participate on the occasion of the 11th session of the UNTOC Conference of the Parties as a co-sponsor together with the government of India in this side event, which is dedicated to the topic, the link between illicit trade in tobacco products and other criminal activities. The WCO 70 years ago was not originally established as a law enforcement agency or the body, but as an independent intergovernmental body whose mission was to enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of customs administrations, more in facilitation of trade. It means, in fact, we do not and cannot work with data on persons or businesses who are involved or are suspected of involvement in illicit trade. Only our members and law enforcement agencies and authorities as partners of our organization can do that. But the mission of customs has changed during the time. And of course, our role now is also to support our members and partners in fulfilling their tasks and competencies also in the field of combating illegal activities. The topic of illegal tobacco trade and its connection with other criminal activities and transnational criminal groups is very serious for us and our members, as well as for the international community. It is very appropriate also for this forum, especially in connection with the cooperation of WCO with both organizations, the Secretariat of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and also with the UNODC. As well, all we know, illegal tobacco trade has a significant impact on governments' efforts to secure global supply chains while depriving them of vital revenues that are crucial in financing and supporting public services, but also with the impact of the public health. Another well-founded concern of governments is that criminal proceeds derived from these illegal activities, as Madam Head of the Secretariat of FCTC said, that with profit margin of up to 900%, will almost inevitably be invested in other illicit activities such as human trafficking, arms smuggling, drug trafficking, environmental crime, cultural heritage trafficking, money laundering, and even terrorist activities, and thereby undermining public safety, good governance, and the rule of law. Blood, threats, bribery, and corruption are no strangers to cigarette smuggling and other illegal activities. The Italian mafia in Western Europe, East European gangs, triads in Asia, drug cartels in Colombia and other states, motorcycle gangs and American mafia in North America, as well as terrorist organizations or groups, all have become entrenched in the game. Losses for governments are already counted in trillions of US dollars, which drains countries of valuable resources and impedes its sustainable development. Now I will speak a little bit about the COVID pandemic, which resulted in the restricted movement of people across the borders and a decline in production and trade. Insufficient sources of raw materials for production and trade are another key factor that supported illegal trade during the pandemic. Closed borders and restrictions imposed by governments were a major source of supply chain disruption. But despite air and land borders being closed for passengers, criminal networks found ways to continue smuggling and feeding the black market with drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, and other illegal products. Organized criminal groups in Europe have shifted their focus towards manufacturing counterfeit cigarettes. Illegal manufacturing sites are increasingly moving west in Europe to get closer to higher priced end markets such as Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, France, and the UK. In the field of combating illegal tobacco trade, we have a very good cooperation with WHO FCTC Secretariat in the form of support for the acceptance and implementation of the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. An excellent example of our joint cooperation in the fight against illicit trade in general, including illicit tobacco trade, is our joint WCO UNODC project, the Container Control Program, which was established already in 2004, it means 18 years ago. The mission of the program is to build capacity in countries seeking to improve risk management, supply chain security, and trade facilitation in seaports, airports, and land border crossing points in order to prevent the cross-border movement of illicit goods. At present, this program is operational in 73 member states and 102 port control units and 27 air cargo control units have been established since 2004. These interagency units are equipped to exchange information with their counterparts in other countries using a secure communication application developed by the WCO called Container.com. These efforts within the years resulted in seizures of wide range of prohibited goods such as weapons, ammunition, proceeds of fisheries, forest, wildlife, and other environmental crime, prohibited drugs, strategic goods, falsified or unlicensed medicines, precursors for drugs and explosives, cigarettes, alcohol, stolen vehicles, goods which are counterfeit or other violate intellectual property law. The program remains ideally placed to support the strengthening of international supply chain security by building national border administration's capacities to tackle threats related to sea, land, and air cargo. This program is also supported by another WCO tool, a cargo target system, a risk assessment and targeting solutions for cargo manifests. The WCO cargo targeting system software was developed by and is owned by WCO and is available to our members without purchase or license fees. It provides purpose-built cargo risk assessment and targeting capability in the maritime, container, and air cargo domains, incorporating the latest international standards and best practices. Both programs also provide support and training for participating members. The exchange of intelligence at national, regional, and international level is a critical mechanism employed by customs authorities to create conditions for more efficient enforcement actions and controls, and to secure the optimum use of available resources. Therefore, we established at the regional levels our regional intelligence liaison offices with the intent of creating a global intelligence network. Today, we have 12 offices in all 6 regions of the WCO, which are also supported by our capacity building offices and regional training centers. As another tool to fight excise fraud, the WCO has launched recently a new customs enforcement network communication platform, ExciseNet, which is the closed virtual expert group focus on tobacco and alcohol fraud in order to fight the illicit production, trafficking, and smuggling of tobacco and alcohol around the world. The main aim of the platform is to provide members with a smart communication tool to facilitate information and intelligence sharing, identify new modus operandi, trends and risk indicators, and enhance the quality and quantity of seizure data in the global SEN database. Today, it comprises 210 users from 93 WCO members and 4 regional intelligence license offices. And still registration is still opened. Operational activities represent another important tool to fight against illegal trade and other illegal activities. The WCO developed links operation concept focused on intelligence and information exchange on suspicious shipments movements within a specific regions. This concept was created regarding operational fatigue when organizing global operations. During the operations already carried out in the region of Western Balkans, the Asia Pacific focused primarily for tobacco products. Various illegal goods were seized, such as cigarettes, raw tobacco, counterfeit goods, electronic waste, drugs, and others. Based on the analysis carried out by our RILO of Commonwealth of Independent States, we jointly organized an interregional operation Pathfinder at the end of 2021, especially focused on the illegal trade in tobacco products. We involved European Anti-Fraud Office and Interpol as our partners, as this operation covered the Asia Pacific region, Middle East and North Africa and Europe region. Out of illegal cigarettes, our members seized also empty packages, filters, cigarette paper, cardboard, packaging film, as well machines intended for new production and packaging line, and exposed an illegal factory. During our enforcement activities, we observed that the intermingling of illegal trade in tobacco products with other illegal activities is evident. A special example are conflict zones, as mentioned before, where profits from illegal trade in tobacco, alcohol, and mineral resources are used to finance terrorist groups and their activities, sometimes with an impact on the territorial integrity of states and rule of law. How should we respond to all these challenges associated with illicit trade? I will probably repeat already known facts. I think raising awareness among political decision makers, existing legislation should be evaluated in order to improve deterrence mechanism, such as introduction of higher penalties and confiscation of assets obtained or used in connection with such illegal activities, enhance cooperation and information exchange. Customs law and law enforcement authorities need to be better equipped in terms of personnel and technical resources. Cooperation between policymakers, law enforcement agencies, and private sector to prosecute and detect illegal trafficking needs to be deepened. I hope I covered what I wanted to cover. I hope I was not too long. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward for questions.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, for that comprehensive presentation. Please, may I remind everyone who's participating with us here today to put your questions in the Q&A chat or the Q&A box on the Zoom platform. So our next speaker today is Ted Leggett, who will present on the Organized Crime Convention and on the protocol and on the interaction between the two. Ted has been a crime researcher for UNODC for 18 years. And previously was a crime researcher for the Institute for Security Studies and the University of Natal in South Africa. So please, Ted, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I have a PowerPoint presentation to deliver here. My understanding of my assignment today is that I will explain the TOC convention to the protocol people and explain the protocol to the TOC people. So everyone will be bored at some point in my presentation, and I apologize for that, but it's only 6 minutes long, so we'll try to be graceful about it. I thought I'd open with a more general question, though, that I think highlights the importance of the protocol. So next slide, please. So the question is, why are we winning against tobacco addiction, but not against illicit drugs? Here I've selected the United States as a case study because the United States has good data, but also because it's interesting. You can see that in 1965, over 40% of American adults were current cigarette smokers. And by 2015, that was down to 15%. So a decade to decade consistent decline over the years in the popularity of cigarettes in the United States. And even more remarkably, just recently, in the last 5 years, you can see that for the first time in 2020, Americans over the age of 12 were more likely to have used an illicit drug in the United States than they were to have used cigarettes, with the illicit drug trend coming upwards and the cigarette trend coming downwards. So how can we explain this remarkable success? Is it possible that maybe just tobacco is an easier drug to kick than the other sorts of drugs? Next slide, please. And well, the best evidence that we have suggests no, that's actually not the case. This is based on some research done in the UK by a professor with the unfortunate surname of Nutt and his colleagues, where he tried to evaluate the harms of various licit and illicit drugs. And one of the parameters they looked at is the ability to produce dependence. So according to their evaluation, basically tobacco is less likely to produce dependence than heroin or cocaine, but more likely to produce dependence than alcohol, benzodiazepines, amphetamine, or cannabis. So it's not something pharmacological about tobacco that makes it easier to beat societally than illicit drugs. So what is it? What's the secret sauce that allows us to make so much progress on tobacco, but not on other sorts of addictive drugs? Next slide, please. According to the experts, the World Health Organization, the secret is taxes. Taxes is what allows this. According to the most recent report of the on the illicit tobacco epidemic by the World Health Organization, raising taxes to increase the price of tobacco products is the single most effective tobacco control measure. And what's smuggling about? Smuggling's about avoiding taxes, going from low tax jurisdictions to high tax jurisdictions, or from tobacco producers directly to tobacco consumers and avoiding tax altogether. You can see that the share of the cost of a tobacco packet is a higher share of it is taxes in richer countries than in lower countries, but still, even in developing countries, taxes basically double the cost of cigarettes, which makes them less accessible to people, and that makes limits the spread of the epidemic. So that's why the protocol is so important. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. As has been said a couple of times, this is a very recent protocol, international instrument, only entering into force at the end of 2018, and it currently only has 66 parties, a limitation we'll discuss in a second. Also under Article 14, the parties are required to deem unlawful a whole list of activities related to tobacco smuggling and other sorts of tobacco offenses, but it leaves open whether or not these will actually be criminal offenses or not, and it certainly doesn't prescribe penalties. So the way that each of the parties enforce their anti-tobacco smuggling measures varies between countries. Next slide, please. In contrast, the Transnational Organized Crime Convention, Transnational Organized Crime Convention has near universal adherence with 190 some parties today. And it does require the criminalization of particular conduct, including the 4 big offenses of participating in an organized crime group, which is conspiracy, laundering the proceeds of crime, corruption, and obstruction of justice. It also has requirements to establish particular legal measures, including the liability of legal persons, the confiscation of the proceeds of crime, and special investigative techniques, and it has provisions promoting international cooperation, including extradition, mutual legal assistance, and things of this sort. So the interesting thing is that actually these same provisions are present in the protocol. But of course, the protocol has less reach because it has fewer parties. Next slide, please. So what is the scope of the Organized Crime Convention? Well, as per Article 3, Section 1, the convention applies to serious crime and offenses established in accordance with the convention where it involves an organized criminal group or the offense is transnational in nature. Next slide, please. So the definition of an organized criminal group, and I'm sure all the TOC people could probably chant this with me, but it's a structured group of 3 or more persons existing for a period of time, acting in concert with the aim of committing 1 or more serious offenses, which is offenses punishable by 4 or more years imprisonment, or any of those 4 offenses established in accordance with the convention, in order to obtain a financial or other material benefit, either directly or indirectly. Next slide, please. So Could cigarette smuggling be combated utilizing UNTOC? Yes, if the relevant offense is punishable by 4 or more years in prison under local law. I checked the U.S. Criminal Code. The penalty under the federal law for tobacco smuggling is 5 years, so that one's qualifies. I don't know what the Philippines has included tobacco in their Anti-Agricultural Smuggling Act of 2016. I know that we're talking about it, but if they did, that would be 15 years in prison, so that would also qualify. We could go country by country, but it's clear that in a number of countries, this tobacco smuggling would qualify as a serious offense and therefore could be prosecuted or be handled under the UNTOC. Also, if it's prosecuted, is one of the 4 crimes under UNTOC, including conspiracy, and we know that most of these offenses would be considered conspiracies. And this would allow the extradition, the joint investigation, the mutual legal assistance, and the cooperation for confiscation, including from legal persons, corporations, that's available under the UNTOC for tobacco trafficking. That's all I think I had to say today, and I'm a minute over time, so I apologize. Thank you.
Thanks very much for all of that information, Ted. You made very good use of your time indeed. So we'll move on now to our next speaker. And again, please, listeners, people who are participating, use the Q&A function should any questions occur to you as our presenters are making their presentations. Our next speaker is Piotr Strzeżowski, who will give us an overview of the global illicit trade as a well-organized business. Now, Piotr is a senior economist at the OECD, who is in charge of the task force on countering illicit trade. He supervises factual research on the magnitude and scope of illicit trade and on governance solutions to counter this threat. So please, Piotr, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me today. It's a real honor and pleasure to be at such an esteemed meeting. I'd like to thank the WHO for the excellent job, not only in combating illicit trade in tobacco products, but also for collaboration and putting all the relevant stakeholders together, as well as thank the Indian government and our WCO colleagues for contributing to this important event. As you rightly said, my name is Piotr Strzeżowski, and at the OECD, I manage a small official body of the OECD that is called the Task Force on Countering Illicit Trade. The task force, as I said, is an official body, and its mandate is very short and very difficult, because our mandate is to enhance evidence on illicit trade and scope relevant governance gaps. It's a very short mandate, but it's difficult because illicit trade is illicit. Data are hard to find, and criminals who run illicit trade networks, they are very smart. They're actually excellent businessmen who maximize profits and minimize risks. They know how to escape the spotlights of enforcement, but also of statistical agencies. I only have 5 minutes left, so I'll just focus on key messages that we want to convey today. And actually, there are 2 of them. One is something about the evidence that we collect and gather. Our evidence is primarily based on data, on seizure data that we receive from our enforcement colleagues. And here I would like to thank WCO for the trust and for the excellent collaboration with us. But this data is then complemented with interviews with experts in the field, be it from enforcement, from trade communities, from all those that can give us a chance to check whether our data, messages based on data make sense. So what we see is that firstly, illicit trade in general is a massive scale, right? We talk about multi-billion-dollar business. This is not a fun fact. This is not something that goes into a trivia part of a newspaper. No, we estimate only that illicit trade in counterfeits, for example, amounts to $460 billion a year, right? $460 billion a year, right? This is magnitude of GDPs of countries. We're not talking about, jackpot order of magnitude. I believe for a single individual, this is a value that is unimaginable, right? We talk about really massive, massive sectors. What we also see that the scale of operation is, again, very complex. Firstly, criminals that run illicit trade networks, they really do not care whether they focus on goods that infringe IP rights, whether they focus on goods that, create some excise fraud. No, they look for money that is big and easy, right? And therefore, it's such a challenge for agencies that measure it and to counter it, because criminals want to escape the light, escape the edge of enforcement. But what we see is that the nature of criminal network smuggling is really blurring. We see criminal network smuggling not only tobacco, be it counterfeit tobacco, be it tobacco that violates taxation rights, but also the same criminals smuggle other excise goods. They smuggle medicines, illicit medicines, substandard medicines. They smuggle counterfeits. In some countries, they smuggle narcotics, oil, cultural heritage products, or even are engaged in human trafficking. Right? These guys have no ethics. They seek for easy money and big money. And once they control supply chains, they really don't care what they smuggle. What we also see that criminals that run illicit trade networks, they are really good in abusing modern supply chains. What we see when we look at illicit trade is that over the past 20 years, there were many revolutions in illicit trade. And the COVID crisis only speeded up these processes. Such solutions as e-commerce, containerized maritime transport, small parcels, or free trade zones have been only multiplying and expanding their role in facilitating illicit trade. And don't get me wrong, trade is great, trade is fantastic, right? But we must not forget that all these great solutions that are, well, created and used to facilitate trade are also abused by criminal actors that know how to make use of them. In the context of illicit trade in tobacco, of course, container ships play a prominent role, but also free trade zones. We see many, not all, but some free trade zones being abused in smuggling of cigarettes, the same way they are used in smuggling of medicines, counterfeit goods, excise goods, or wildlife products. Given this complexity, what is important? Now I go to my last point. What is important is, of course, collaboration and cooperation, right? No single agency, no single country can win this struggle. From the OECD's perspective, we propose non-binding voluntary solutions that reinforce existing rules-based international order. We propose development of voluntary standards that could be then developed by those private sector, such as FTZ's management, operators of container ships, or small parcels operators, by those of them that want to join the fight against illicit trade, go 1 mile ahead and be transparent and clean. So from the OECD perspective, we want to empower them with some standards and encourage at the same time ratification of existing conventions, such as, for example, WCO's RKC. And all of this should be seen as one element of a jigsaw puzzle of a bigger picture of coordination, collaboration between different agencies whose efforts are absolutely essential. And in this context, me again congratulate you, congratulate the WHO for going outside the box and reaching out to so many agencies. You do a great job. And I think I've exceeded my 6 minutes time. Thank you.
Kate, I'm sorry, but I cannot hear you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I thought you could all lip read. Thank you very much, Piotr, for that very, very important presentation. Of course, in terms of the protocol to eliminate the illicit trade in tobacco products, we do have a very clear blueprint, a set of obligations that parties then implement to make up one piece of this much larger puzzle that you've described, Piotr. So our next speaker is Michael McLagan, who will talk for a few minutes about the illicit tobacco flows in East and Southern Africa. Now, Michael is an analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and his work includes research and analysis of illicit markets and criminality in, of course, Southern and East Africa. And this includes research on gangs, illicit tobacco, charcoal, wildlife products, amongst other items. So please, Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for hosting the Global Initiative at this side event. So as Kate says, my presentation will deal with illicit tobacco flows, specifically of cigarettes in East and Southern Africa, and how actors involved avoid controls designed to counter this trade. So both intrastate and interstate flows are problematic, Intrastate is when products are manufactured in one country and are illicitly traded in that country of manufacture. Interstate, when they're manufactured in one country and are illicitly traded in another. These are some of the means by which actors involved evade taxes and avoid regulations. I will be referring to some of those with reference to examples as I go along. And these are some of the major facilitators we've identified. For the purposes of this presentation, I'll be focusing on the bottom two, that being corruption amongst custom officials and law enforcement, and the porosity of borders in the regions concerned. So over here, we have a map of flows through selected countries in East Africa. This is by no means exhaustive. These are just some of the major routes we have identified and are monitoring. Note that these are flows both into and out of the countries concerned. So for example, Kenya is a major source country for these illicit cigarettes, and it is also a major destination country. Now, in terms of actors involved, these range from very low-level individual opportunists trying to eke out a living through smuggling, to more sophisticated syndicates that may have better access to transport, to tobacco companies themselves playing an active role in facilitating smuggling. In terms of where these products come from, much of it is produced within the region, but other stock does come from further afield, such as the Middle East. In terms of how the smuggling takes place, smaller consignments are typically moved along what are called panyo routes. These are informal border crossings away from official scrutiny, highlighting the issue of porous borders. Larger consignments typically come through the official border posts, but are concealed in secret compartments and amongst other stock. Other times, stock does cross the border legally at first, but gets lost in transit on its way to its ostensible destination. And the products are then illegally sold in that transit country, beg your pardon. Now, in instances where consignments are detected, some instances, not all, our monitors on the ground note that bribery of officials to turn a blind eye is a common practice. In some instances, they've noted that when a seizure is made, the officials may hold this confiscated stock only to be used as leverage to extort smugglers to pay higher bribes, highlighting the issue of corruption amongst officials tasked with combating this trade. Over here, we have a picture of a large consignment of cigarettes, which was seized by the Uganda Revenue Authority. It was being hidden in sacks of charcoal, demonstrating one of the innovative measures that smugglers use to get their products across borders. Moving on to Southern Africa now, we see that most of these flows head towards South Africa. Not all of them, as there is an illicit market in each country concerned, but South Africa having the largest population in the region, as well as the country where smokers typically have a higher disposable income, it is the most lucrative market for smugglers to target. Zimbabwe is a major source, it being the largest producer of tobacco in Africa, as well as being a major cigarette manufacturer. A lot of these products cross the South Africa-Zimbabwe border illegally. Now, many of the same dynamics that we've observed in East Africa are present here, such as porous borders that can easily be traversed on foot, as you see in that image to your right, and larger consignments being hidden amongst other stock in trucks, etc. Over here, we have an image of an oil tanker that otherwise would have come back empty, carrying a large consignment of illicit cigarettes. Now, speaking to operations managers for trucking companies, many are of the opinion that border authorities do have the requisite technology in the form of scanners to detect these illicit consignments, but that a lot more is coming through than what should be, indicating that officials could be compromised. And indeed, some customs officials have been arrested in the past for direct involvement in cigarette smuggling. Likewise, police in the region have also been arrested for trying to sell confiscated stock. Now, for as problematic as interstate flows into South Africa are, researchers agree that much, if not most, of these illicit products are manufactured locally. And so intrastate smuggling is as much of an issue as interstate smuggling. How this happens is through undeclared production. So far more products are manufactured than what are declared to the authorities. And sometimes products may be declared for export only to never leave the country in what is known as ghost exports. Now, this is a problem not just for the Southern African region. As an organized crime and corruption reporting project report from last year revealed, a very well-known multinational corporation manufacturing cigarettes in South Africa was exporting these products to Mali, where major trade misinvoicing was taking place. and far fewer cigarettes were declared as imported than what were ostensibly exported thereto. This excess stock was ending up on the black markets of Mali and the Greater Sahel, and the proceeds of which were being used to fund armed groups. And allegedly, the company in question had full knowledge of this. In another recent example of industry skullduggery, a corporation based in South Africa, but with operations throughout Southern Africa, has been under investigation by the South African Revenue Service for presiding over a sophisticated money laundering operation. How this would work is they would hire cash in transit companies to pick up large consignments of cash at designated points, deposit these into bank accounts linked to cash-intensive companies to disguise the origins of this cash, and then funnel it into offshore bank accounts held by personnel in this company. In addition to this, they had also been paying bribes to employees of a certain bank involved to delete records of these transactions. So this was a very sophisticated criminal enterprise. And what I've tried to demonstrate through use of these examples is that in addition to being a threat to public health and depriving especially developing economies of much needed revenue, illicit tobacco trade is very often serious organized crime and poses a threat to both governance and the rule of law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that really interesting and important look at what's happening on the ground and what the problem really looks like when you get much closer to it. So we've been asking you throughout the course of today's webinar, today's side event, to submit your questions. So we do have a few that have been submitted. There's one that is probably best answered by Ted, if I may. So if we could just keep our responses quite brief, we have time for just a few questions. So Ted, what are the areas of research and analysis that parties should be prioritizing so that they can better understand illicit trade in tobacco products?
Well, we've learned from other types of commodities that we worked on that it's very important to have a global reference set of data, particularly enforcement data, in order to understand the trends globally. And so hopefully in the near future, we'll be gathering this information in cooperation with the Protocol Secretariat in order to inform the global discourse with real numbers about the prevalence and routes and other significant facts about the trafficking that's currently taking place. So that would be my recommendation: participate in information sharing, and we can put together a global picture for everyone.
Thanks very much, Ted. Wise advice indeed. Next, a question that might best be answered by Michael. Michael, could you please point out good sources of data and information on illicit trade in tobacco products that aren't funded by the tobacco industry?
Sure. So I'll cite one example that was on my slides, and this was a court case that was decided in Uganda. Now, what was happening there is one tobacco company had actually taken another one to court for one, a trademark infringement, and two, allegedly illicitly trading in tobacco products illegally. Now, what was happening is the company that was taken to court was exporting cigarettes that were manufactured in Kenya, ostensibly to South Sudan, but that a lot of these were ending up in Uganda. But now it didn't have the license to trade in South Sudan either. So either it reaches its final destination where it's not allowed to be traded, or it gets lost along the way in Uganda. Now, the judge in the case found that, well, these cigarettes are ending up in Uganda, but we can't prove that it's this company that's doing it. But even if they got to South Sudan, see what I mean? It would have been illegal anyway. The judge further decided that, well, that's a matter for authorities in South Sudan to decide. So this highlights the issue of, one, tobacco companies not taking care of their supply chains, even if not directly involved. Because they're not securing their supply chains, they are essentially facilitating illicit trade by default. And two, it highlights the issue of lack of regional cooperation to address these issues. Now, in that second example I referred to, which was the case of the cigarettes from South Africa going to Mali, this is a matter of public record, and you can find this on the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project's website. They went into quite substantial detail about this. I won't mention the name of the company concerned, but it's there, you can find it. And in that more recent example of the tobacco company in South Africa, for years, they've been accused of, facilitating illicit trade. And this is an example where they've actually been caught red-handed. So tobacco companies have been caught doing this in the past. I hope that answers the questions. There's also a lot of literature on the matter. For example, Dirty Tobacco by Talita Snickers is an expose of the industry and how historically multiple companies have been involved in illicit trade directly.
Thanks very much, Michael. And I see, unfortunately, that we are drawing very close to the end of our session today. So unfortunately, we did have a few more questions, but we will have to pursue them on another occasion with our presenters. Thank you very, very much to everyone for joining us for this webinar, this side event. And we've heard a number of extremely interesting presentations and the beginning of a very interesting discussion as well. Very special thanks to our speakers for their presentations, but also to all of you, our participants today, for taking the time to listen into this side event. We very much appreciate your time today. Finally, I'd also like to thank my colleagues in the Convention Secretariat working very hard behind the scenes to help prepare this side event. And of course, very warm thanks go to the Government of India and the World Customs Organization for co-sponsoring this side event with us today. We would just like to inform you that this a recording of this particular event will be available on the YouTube page of the Convention Secretariat. That is the WHO FCTC Secretariat. And for now, thanking you all very much and wishing you a very good end to your day. Thanks a lot.